the world was still, reacting to Donald Trump's dramatic appearance on the global stage when he dismissed climate change as a hoax, took credit for ending wars, insulted European leaders, and even lashed out at the mayor of London. His words exposed America's deep political divides, while international audiences tried to make sense of what many called a spectacle. At the UN, Trump accused European nations of decline, claimed London was falling under Sharia law, and brushed off renewable energy as nothing more than a scam. Back home, his attention quickly turned inward. Within a single day, Trump fired off a series of social media posts targeting journalists, lawmakers, and political rivals. The pace and intensity of his attacks left many asking, was this just retaliation, or part of something bigger? Was he aiming to grab headlines, intimidate opponents, or shift attention from rising global tensions? His behavior seemed less like impulse, and more like a deliberate escalation of America's political battles. Late in the evening of September 23rd, shortly after his UN speech, Trump launched his first strike against the media. His target, ABC and late-night host Jimmy Kimmel. He mocked the network, saying he couldn't believe they had given Kimmel his job back, claiming the White House had been told his show was canceled. Trump didn't stop there. He continued his late-night tirade by mocking Jimmy Kimmel directly, saying the comedian had no audience, no talent, and put ABC at risk by pushing what he called one-sided, pro-Democrat views. He even suggested that giving Kimmel airtime was like handing out an illegal campaign contribution, hinting that he might challenge the network legally. Bragging about past clashes, Trump claimed his fights with ABC had already made him millions, and he expected this one to be even more profitable. The attack came during a tense moment for the network. Earlier that week, ABC had suspended Jimmy Kimmel Live after the host faced criticism for a controversial monologue about conservative activist Charlie Kirk. The suspension quickly drew outrage from free speech advocates, entertainment unions, and writers' groups, who denounced it as censorship. When the show returned on September 23rd, the controversy only deepened. Some affiliate stations, including Nexter and Sinclair, refused to broadcast the program unless Kimmel apologized. Trump seized on the moment. His comments weren't just random insults. They were part of a broader battle between his movement and the mainstream media. By framing Kimmel's reinstatement as proof of bias and corruption, Trump positioned himself once again as a challenger to what he called unfair coverage. The very next afternoon, his focus shifted to Congress. On September 24th, he blasted Democratic leaders, rejecting their demands in budget negotiations. He accused them of trying to hold the government hostage for over $1 trillion in new spending, while pushing policies he denounced as extreme, from free healthcare for undocumented immigrants to taxpayer-funded gender-affirming surgeries for minors. He painted the proposals as reckless, accusing Democrats of wanting open borders, wasteful programs, and threats to women's sports. Trump doubled down on his attacks, claiming that Democratic policies were the very reason he won the presidency, not only carrying all 7 swing states, but also, according to him, the popular vote in what he called a historic landslide. He argued that Democrats had not accepted the reality of their defeat and accused them of trying to dismantle programs he credited to his administration, including a $50 billion fund for rural and struggling hospitals. In his remarks, he painted Democrats as a party adrift, disconnected from what he described as America First values. He charged that their agenda was filled with extreme policies, from higher taxes and open borders to leniency for violent criminals and taxpayer-funded gender surgeries. Trump insisted these ideas were not what voters had chosen and warned they would lead the country to ruin. By contrast, he positioned himself and Republicans as defenders of common sense and pledged to negotiate if Democrats abandoned what he called their radical approach. He said keeping the government open was a matter of patriotism and urged Democrats to return to what he viewed as the true principles of the nation. Otherwise, he warned, the country would remain stuck in a cycle of partisan gridlock. Addressing Democratic leaders directly, Trump told them the next move was theirs. He said he was willing to meet if they became realistic about America's future, but until then, the responsibility for progress rested with them. For those trying to understand how this speech fit into Trump's broader political battles. The message was clear. He wasn't just reacting to policy disputes, but continuing a long-running clash with his opponents over the direction of the country. At the time, the U.S. government was once again caught in a bitter standoff over funding bills. With Democrats and Republicans digging in, the negotiations grew more heated by the hour. Trump used the moment to frame himself as the stronger side, casting Democrats as extremists who, in his view, were willing to shut the government down unless their demands were met. By early afternoon, he escalated his rhetoric. Trump accused Democrats of wanting free health care for undocumented immigrants, even those he claimed were violent criminals. He charged them with trying to funnel hundreds of millions of dollars into left-leaning media, keeping dead people on federal benefit rolls to enable fraud, and slashing support for rural hospitals that his administration said it had helped rescue. He also pointed to issues like transgender rights, men competing in women's sports, open borders, and what he described as Democrats' tolerance for crime. In Trump's framing, these weren't just disagreements over policy. He depicted the Democratic agenda as a direct threat to the country's survival, a recipe for cultural chaos, institutional collapse, and rising crime. His message was clear. Democrats weren't just rivals. They were endangering America's future. But later that same afternoon, the political conflict collided with a real-world crisis. At 4:15 p.m., news broke of a sniper attack on an immigration and customs enforcement facility in Dallas. In his response, Trump posted that he had been briefed on the deadly shooting at the ICE field office in Dallas. He noted that shell casings at the scene were marked with the phrase anti-ICE, calling the act despicable. He praised ICE officers as men and women simply doing their jobs to remove dangerous criminals, while warning that they now faced rising threats and violence from what he called radical leftists. Trump tied the attack to broader political rhetoric, accusing Democrats of fueling hostility by demonizing law enforcement, comparing ICE to Nazis, and calling for the agency's abolition. He linked the violence to what he described as a wave of left-wing extremism in the aftermath of the assassination of conservative activist Charlie Kirk. Promising action, Trump said ICE officers and law enforcement across the country were under grave threat. He reminded his audience that Antifa had already been designated a terrorist group and pledged to sign an executive order targeting domestic extremist networks. He demanded Democrats halt their rhetoric against ICE and law enforcement, framing his administration as fully committed to securing borders, deporting violent offenders, and protecting officers on the front lines. The reality on the ground was grim. In Dallas, a gunman opened fire from a rooftop onto the ICE facility, killing one detainee and critically wounding others before turning the weapon on himself. Investigators confirmed that at least one unused cartridge carried the words anti-ICE, pointing to political motivation. Though no ICE agents were harmed, the attack underscored escalating hostilities. It followed a string of earlier incidents, including a July assault on another Texas ICE facility in Alvarado, tied to violent protests. The political response to the Dallas shooting was immediate. Republicans, including Trump, argued that Democratic rhetoric against law enforcement had created an atmosphere that encouraged violence. Democrats and their allies countered that it was irresponsible to exploit a tragedy for political advantage. Instead, they called for a focus on public safety solutions and stronger guardrails against incendiary political speech. Just minutes later, Trump shifted his attention to former Vice President Kamala Harris. In a scathing post, he mocked her intelligence and accused her of spreading lies about the 2024 election. Harris had claimed that 2024 was the closest presidential race of the 21st century, a line Trump dismissed outright. He insisted the numbers told a different story. His electoral college victory, he said, was decisive. His county wins overwhelming. And despite what he called fraudulent mail-in ballots from California, he maintained that he had carried the popular vote by millions. Trump contrasted his claims with George W. Bush's razor-thin 2,000 margin, arguing that Harris's statement was not only misleading but part of a larger pattern of dishonesty from Democrats. Demanding an apology, he framed her comments as yet Another example of how the opposition twisted facts to undermine him. With each new post, whether on Jimmy Kimmel, the IC attack, or election disputes, Trump's narrative grew sharper and more combative. He wasn't just challenging his rivals. He was portraying them as fundamental threats to America's survival. For his supporters, it was exactly the kind of fight they had signed up for. For Trump's critics, his rhetoric signaled something far more troubling: a dangerous escalation in a country already grappling with political violence, mistrust of the media, and deepening polarization. The story may pause here, but my message to you continues. This channel has no corporate sponsors, no big backers, no safety net. It exists solely because of people like you. If you believe that truth should never be for sale, I need your support. Subscribe, share this video, and leave your thoughts in the comments. Every click, every comment, every subscription tells the algorithm that independent voices still matter, that truth matters. It may seem like a small gesture, but together, it's the only way channels like this can grow, and the only way truth can survive.